Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Honest Indies podcast, a place where we have honest conversations about our love for indie games with the people who make them. And today I'm being joined by our first guest that I actually know, a former teacher of mine, Sherveen. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'm Sherveen. My pronouns are he, they. I'm a freelance game developer. I've been working in the industry for about like 10 years now. I've done work at some things in the mobile space. I worked on like a mobile game for like one of the Funko Pop games, and I did something for like Devolver Digital, like a mobile game for them way back when. I also do kind of my own indie projects. I'm working on a game called Midautumn, which is has a lot to do with Asian diaspora, and it's I tell people it's kind of like Hades meets Butterfly Soup. And I'm hearing like some really loud banging. I don't know if you can hear that, but
A
I
little bit.
don't know what that is. But
That's okay.
um, no worries. But yeah, worked on Mid Autumn, and I also do like some games education work as well on the side, and I've been doing a lot of organizing as well recently with United Video Game Workers over this past year. And yeah, that's pretty much me. I do a lot of different odd jobs in the industry.
And we met also online, like right now, because you used to teach with Coven, which is
Hmm.
a group that works with underrepresented people, both in terms of gender and color of our skin, and sometimes both, and tries to help bring more people into the industry that are marginalized and might not otherwise have opportunities. And you specifically taught me a bit about how to make games in Unity, a little crash course for a few months about
Yeah,
Unity.
absolutely. Yeah, and I hope you're still like making things every now and
We talked about it beforehand, but I'm
then.
trying. I'm working on stuff a little bit. So
Yeah.
hopefully before the end of the year, I have some sort of more complete game that can be played by somebody for some amount of time. And I can at least be like, okay, that's a thing that is done or in a
Hmm.
buildable state so that people can click the mouse a few times. But yeah. So even though I know who you are, even though we know each other, and that's
Hmm.
not typically the case with guests, I definitely don't know everything about you or your journey and how you got from Sri Lanka as a very small
Hmm.
kid to working on your own game in early access in the US. So, what is an early gaming memory you have, whether it's a formative game from growing up or even just like the first time you can recall seeing a game being played or having a controller or something in your hands.
Yeah, so I originally from Sri Lanka, but I grew up mostly in Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, Singapore when I was a bit older. I think my first game console that I remember was like the PlayStation 1, and we had that, and we had like a couple games. I think we had like we kind of weird games now that I think about it. Like I don't know why those were the games we got, but we had like Parasite Eve and like Bloody Roar and like a couple
Wait,
games.
Parasite Eve
And,
is
and
cool.
Parasite Eve is wild now that I think about it. I was because
Yeah.
I would have been like I don't know.
Playing
Too
at what,
young,
8 or
really,
something?
technically, to be playing. But that was like one of my first games. And I do love that. It's really like as a yeah, if you're like 8 years old playing that game, it's really scary actually. Um, because you're like it just like doesn't explain a ton of what's happening, and you're just watching like people turn into monsters. Uh,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, playing a
um,
Resident Evil adjacent game
yes, I
as
feel
a
like
kid.
Resident Evil would have been better because it's like oh a zombie, and Parasite Eve is just like what is happening to these people. So that was like yeah, some of my first games were there. My I feel like I had a conversation with my dad that we had something older like an Atari or an SNES or something, but I only found that out as like an adult, and I was like, oh, like, I guess we had like other games. I just don't remember any of it. Um, but yeah, those are like my early things that I played, and in Vietnam, a lot of the games that you get are actually pirated, so you can't really, without really going outside of the country to like buy things, you can't buy original games, and they, they'd be really expensive too. So you end up buying like a chipped version of the console, and then all of the games are like fake pirated versions that cost like $1. So that was very cool in a way because
Yeah.
I
It's
just
probably
was
great as a
able to
kid.
afford a ton of like weird video games that I got to play. And I specifically remember we had like a drawer, and it was just like like not even like in the cases, just the CDs like loose of like various games because they were like really cheap.
Instead of a
Um,
junk drawer, you had just a
yeah.
disc drawer.
Yes, and then we tried to, yeah. So I would try a lot of things, and I remember that definitely is like a huge contributor of like why I decided to go into video games as a career. But I remember in middle school, I think maybe it was even earlier. Like I bought like a game and I got really upset because it was horrible and I didn't enjoy it. And I was young enough that I was mostly just buying games based on like what I thought like had cool cover art or something. And my brother got really annoyed with me that I was complaining about it. He was like, "You can't buy games that way. That's of course." So he's like, "You have to start like reading a review or something." And so I think that's literally one of the things that got me started on thinking about games in a critical sense. Was I was just like probably like, yeah, I'm in middle school or something, getting home from school, reading a lot of GameSpot at the time. I was just like reading the reviews and thinking about, oh, this seems good, and then like, playing it and being like, oh, I disagree with this review or something like that. So after doing like at a certain point I was like, I'm spending a lot of time just reading gaming news and stuff, and it would be much more productive if I was doing that like in some kind of it as a goal to do it professionally or something. It makes it less of a waste of time, and I could justify it to my parents a lot more.
That's
So
funny. I mean, in some ways, like my story's a bit similar, at least in terms of like timeline
mhm.
of hitting middle school and then being like, wait, I can also like read about games and learn about them from ways other than what my friends tell me and like store shelves. Because until I was 11 or 12, that was pretty much how I got anything. Was like someone would randomly gift me a game, a friend
Mhm.
would have one, and I'd go over and be like, this game's cool, can I have it too? And then just looking at box art and deciding like between two different things of like, this one looks cool, this also looks cool. That's how I ended up with Final Fantasy IX instead of Chrono Cross. I think those were
Okay.
like two different JRPGs where I'm like, I can have one. And FF9 is pretty great. So I think I still made a pretty good choice there. But yeah, middle school, it was then finally reading official Xbox magazine and a little
Mhm.
bit of Nintendo Power and Game Informer and stuff. I was mostly reading magazines for a while before I actually thought, oh, hey, I could like look up gaming websites. I was a little slow to that. But also, I'm a little bit older than you. I'm 35. I think
Yeah.
you're 30, 31.
31 this
Okay.
year.
And like we still had dial up until I graduated high school. So I think
Mhm.
that's also part of why I wasn't reading gaming news yet. I wasn't on GameSpot until
Well,
college because
so
like my
the
internet usage was so limited.
a good thing though is like when you think about it, because I grew up outside the US, everything's in like a little bit of a delay. So we also had dial up until I was like, I don't even know. I feel like almost like 10 or something. We had like dial up internet or something like, and then yeah, eventually got better internet. But I think it was like literally like in my teens that I remember having good internet.
Yeah, for me, when I went to college, the dorm that I moved into had just gotten Wi-Fi installed over the summer, so I was like, blew my mind. But okay, so anyway, you have this drawer full of games. You're playing a lot
Yes.
of kind of knockoffs
And like
of
with yeah, and
existing
with
games.
knockoffs, so like a lot of the time they don't work, or you'll play them
Sure.
and they'll be like broken in some way. So there's a lot of games that I was just like, well, I tell people I never played Kingdom Hearts 2 specifically because so I played the first one and I got the second one, and the whatever version that they had in Vietnam was like broken. So like you'd play it, and we'd play like the first. 20 minutes up to like that first boss, and then it would just like crash. And so I was like, okay. I tried getting another copy of the game, and I was like, oh, it's same thing. So it's like there's a problem with
Damn.
the game itself in Vietnam. So you'd have to get it a different way. So I really only just perceive Kingdom Hearts 2 as just like that opening
20
sequence
minutes.
where they're just like doing a summer job and eating little popsicles and things like that.
That's funny. It's a slice of life game if you only play
Yeah,
20
it's a
minutes of it.
little slice of it because I just played that over and over again.
I love that.
Because I was just like, this time it'll work. And just, there's
And
nothing
then it
else to
wouldn't.
do. So I played that probably like more than anyone else has in the history of Kingdom Hearts 2.
I mean, somewhere there's a dev appreciating that since so many people do just play like early parts of a game and eventually drop off. You just took that very seriously at the very beginning.
Yeah, I probably should have given up earlier now when I think about it. But it was just like, you buy a game and you're like, well, this is the game I bought, and I'm not gonna buy another one for a while, so I'm just gonna keep at it.
Yeah, especially growing up. We didn't have vast Steam libraries of unopened, undownloaded things. Didn't have that much access back in the day. But so when reading stuff at GameSpot, that's when you're like maybe starting to take games seriously. When did you decide like I want to learn how to make games?
Yeah, I think it was like sometime around middle school where I was thinking about it, where in terms of just like I wasn't it was kind of a lie, really. I was just telling my parents like I'm gonna make games and that's why I'm doing all this. But the ability to actually make something took a lot longer to figure out because I just like didn't have any access to a lot of real information. I remember in like high school, like ninth grade or something, I tried to make like a little flash game as a like school project, and I just couldn't figure out how to do it. It took like I spent a long time on it. I made like a little level, and I just couldn't make it work. So it really did take me until college and even like a little bit into college before I was like, oh, I know how to make something. Because like literally my first entire year um, in college, because I went for a games program. And before that, like I was just doing the things that I thought were close. So I did like computer science and I did film and I did art and I was trying to figure out things that seemed like they would be useful. Um, and then yeah, like a lot of that was only kind of useful once I started like learning how to make games. Um, and yeah, I don't think I made my first anything I would consider a game until like sometime in like the second year of college.
But you were still thinking about it. You were still kind of willing it into existence, telling your parents like I'm gonna make stuff. I just don't know how to do
Yeah,
it yet, but it's gonna
it's
happen.
funny to be like saying like looking back on it, saying that, and just being like, and then I continued to just play video games for a really long
It
time.
was practice. You were learning design with a controller in your hand. So, okay, you ended up going to school for games specifically. How did that come about? Like, at what point? So you came to the U.S. Where had you moved from? Like, that's just like another big
Yeah,
leap.
yeah.
Like, I
So
know you
I
weren't
was,
in the
you're
same
right.
town for forever, but going to school
So
abroad is like a big move.
yeah, okay. So I was in Vietnam for most of my childhood, so that's maybe until I was about 14 or so. And then I ended up going to a boarding school in Singapore for maybe like 3 years. And really the reason I did that was because my brother went off to university and I was like, it's kind of like an empty feeling house. And I was like, what if I went to like a boarding school? Would that be cool? My brother actually suggested it to me because he had some friends who had gone to that school and he was like, you should apply to this. I was like, okay. And then so we did that and got accepted into that. And that was really cool because there was a lot more um, like cooler classes, right? Like I wouldn't have had a film class or like access to like a really good computer science class or those sorts of resources if I'd stayed in Vietnam. So um, yeah, Singapore was very cool. And then the whole college admission process was like me trying to talk to people, be like, I kind of want to go to these schools because they have video game programs, and literally like no one else was doing that. So all of the like college guidance counselors were like, I guess you can do this or this. I don't really know enough to know if this is good. And you like I applied to USC, which is kind of my reach school, which is what everyone was telling me. Just my grades were very like fine. I don't think they were like particularly impressive or anything. Um, but I just focused a lot on like my essay, like college admission essay and portfolio samples and things like that. So I was like, okay. And I did end up getting in. It was actually one of those things where like our school was like, we haven't gotten that many people into that school, so we don't have a lot of data. So it was like one or two people had gotten in, and then their like scores were much higher than mine. So I was like, okay, I don't know, maybe that'll happen. So, but when that happened, I was like, okay, that's great. I can do that. I'll go and like figure it out. And then yeah, like after getting into the program, there was still a lot of just like, oh, I don't get how to make games for a very long time.
What
Um,
was sorry, when so you're in the program, but
yeah,
you're a freshman. I'm assuming there's lots of also just like general, you're a freshman in college, here are things you
yeah,
need to take and learn. But what was the process like? Like what were those early classes of starting to be like, here's what a game is? Like was it not until your sophomore year before you were getting much hands-on because it's just the nature of college
yeah.
or
It's just kind of yeah, like the nature of college. I don't think it needs to be like that. I personally think they take too long in the USC Games program to like give you hands-on stuff to do. But I guess it's partially because yeah, you're taking some general college classes as well. They have like a intro programming class you can take, but obviously I'd already been programming, so I was like, I don't know if I want to take that. Um, and they have USC has this really like particular class that you take in because their program was in the film school, and they have this thing called Reality Starts Now, and it's like this weird class where it's like a bunch of lectures from people in various creative industries, and I don't really know what the goal is of the class besides just like you're hearing a bunch of different things and you're like welcome to college or something like
welcome
that.
to reality.
And I actually got in a lot of trouble in that class because we had this assignment where we had to make a PSA for like a climate change PSA or something. And we were like, okay, let's what are we gonna do? I don't know. Let's what if we just film like an ice cube melting, and then we put a bunch of like sounds over it, so it's like animals screaming or something, and it sounds like really horrific, but it's just a picture of an ice cube melting. And we're like, that sounds cool, and it's very simple to do. And then we found out how annoying it is to get an ice cube to melt. It was like the most. I was like, why is this taking so long to melt? And we were like filming this because we were like, oh, we have like 15 minutes. Let's record an ice cube melting. We'll be done, and then we'll edit it together. And that was literally the editing took less time than getting the ice cube to melt. And we were like waiting, and we were like getting a hair dryer and trying to like get this ice cube to melt a little faster. Took a really long time, but we didn't put a ton of thought into that. So we like finished it, submitted it, and then those classes were always Friday mornings, so no one was like awake enough to go to them usually. They're like, so we were like, okay, we'll submitted it. We did our homework, it was fine. And it turns out that in every time they did assignments in that class, they would like pick a couple people to like, I don't know, like win the assignment or something. And like they were like, oh, these are the and so our one got picked and they were like, please come to the front of the class to talk a little bit about your assignment. And no one from our team was there because we all just did like a late night getting it done, and then we're like, okay, good, it's done. And then I think, yeah, literally like got in trouble. they're like they're like, oh, you have to be taking this more seriously, and I was like, I just didn't know. Like we did the work, we just
Yep.
missed the part where we got credit for it, I guess. So that was the first year was that it wasn't making games at all. It was like whatever that was.
Melting
Um,
ice. What's funny too,
and
I could see the argument of being like, oh yeah, like this was actually really accurate. Like the ice caps don't melt overnight, just like this ice cube takes time to melt, but doesn't mean it's not happening and we need to change. That's so funny.
So I think that's what we did. I remember we tried to do a game jam, some other like game interactive media and games students and I in my first year, and it just went horribly. It was just like we didn't figure out how we kept being like, I don't know how to do this. We tried doing this thing and it didn't work, and we like did like a whole like late night trying to get it to work, and we just couldn't get it done. Like we were just like hours from the deadline. We were like, it's just not working. So it's very funny to look back on those moments and be like, oh yeah, that I could make that very easily now. It actually wasn't very difficult. It just was. It just takes time for you to be familiar with a lot of how to make games sometimes.
Totally. So, how do we go from reality starts now class or whatever to then breaking into the industry? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I feel like it felt very slow for me because I was on a student visa, and so there's a lot of like limitations on what you can do. Like I felt like every summer, I don't know how true this is. It's just like the impression I got, but I felt like all of the other students were like, "Oh, I have an internship over the summer, and I'm doing this thing with Sony or Insomniac, or I'm doing that," and I would always be like, "I can't get these to like work out because I would have extra hoops to jump through where you would have to get the internship offer by like a particular date, and then you'd have to sign up for a class that like gives you approval to work because you can't work on a student visa. So it's like all these things. And I finally, I think my first internship I ever got was one for Sundance, and they did their kind of like interactive exhibition that they would have for like the games and VR and things like that called New Frontier. And I literally got that because the person who was hiring for that sent me an email. I was like, "Hey, we're just having trouble like lining up the like payment logistics of it, so it's just gonna take a while and something." And then I literally was like, "Yeah, unfortunately, like I can't do it if it's paid because the deadline has passed. So if you're doing like an unpaid internship, I can do that." But and then they were like, "Okay," and so I was like, that was literally the first thing I got. And I'm very against unpaid internships, actually. Like having done them, I very much think people should, if you're hiring someone to do any kind of work, you can afford to pay them. But yeah, it literally just was impossible for me to get a paid thing until after college at all. So it was the only way I was building up any kind of experience like that. Um, and then I took like a big break after college just because I was had dealing with immigration stuff. So like that whole time I wasn't working in games, and then I graduated in 2017, and I think I was able to find something eventually in, I want to say, 2019. So it was like kind of 2 years where I was just like trying to figure out immigration and work and everything. Um, so that was, yeah, felt very slow to me when I was
It
doing
sounds
it.
like a nightmare.
Uh, but yeah, so now things are a little easier because a lot of the immigration extra hurdles are kind of done. I'm on a green card, so I mean, there's still like if we wanted to do citizenship, but then that's a whole process. But I could actively work, and that's honestly to me like a lot of my career. The main hurdle has been like, oh, I can't do this because legally because of some immigration law thing, or so I would turn down a lot of things that like there's a lot of what ifs of like, oh, what if I'd been able to do this job, or what if I'd been able to do this right out of college or something. Um, but I think the things I did have let me build a lot of very specific skills that are kind of unique to me, I guess. That so that's fun in a way. It's not. I don't think like in making it a living, it's the most like exciting way to think about it. But I enjoy having little skills and being able to tinker with games as well.
What are some of those examples? Like, what are some of those skills that you think you've been able to build up that you might not have had if one of those what ifs had happened
Yeah, I mean,
instead?
I think it's just a lot of things that are related to like being kind of a perma freelancer. So it's I feel like quite fast when I compare like the things I do to some other folks in the industry. And I think there's a lot of being able to jump onto a team very quickly and just like understand how to make some kind of contribution early on. And so it's, to me, like when I do like a lot of contracts, and it's just a necessity of like I need to get a contract and then do something cool relatively early on so they keep hiring me. And so, usually I try to give myself a week to like get onboarded, get like onto usually like their version control or GitHub or something. And the way I think about it is like try and have a commit to the Git repo, so something that's like actually tangibly impacting the game within that first week. And I don't know how many people can actually do that. So that's the thing that I feel very like, I guess, have some sense of pride as like that's a skill. So
Yeah,
things like that. I think there's a lot of being able to do things in a time frame. So a lot of what's annoying about it is a lot of my contracts end up being kind of these things where people come to me and they're like, Sherveen, we only have 3 weeks to do this thing that should take 2 months. Can you do this? And it's like, I mean, I don't want to do it really,
but
but,
you
but
can.
I can do it, I guess. And, depending on the time of year, it's like, this is going to be the contract I do for May, I guess. So I do end up doing a lot of those. Um, and yeah, like the process of that, I'm not very excited that those are the contracts that I get given. But
Okay, we need to cram this in
yeah,
now.
but
You're
it
the guy
is
for
there
it.
is like a nice thing of being like, oh, the type of person that can theoretically do that and also have a reputation that people come to me with those things is kind of like a nice thing to think about yourself, I hope.
And also, some of what you just described feels like it paired well with being like an instructor as well, of being able
Hmm.
to hop into a new team, being like a new class, and figure out how to make an
Yeah, I
impact with
mean,
different people.
my big thing with like teaching is that like I have the sense of like how long it took me to learn things, and so usually when I look at people I'm teaching, I'm like they're picking it up faster than I probably was at that time. So it really is like, oh, if you stick with it and you're consistent, you probably be like miles ahead of where I am in my career, right? So I very much believe that. I feel like I had a lot of things I had to figure out and didn't have access to a lot of those things. Um, and I do try like a lot of I it's interesting when you're teaching because it's very clear like, oh, these are things that I think um, are things I want to show students are like it's easy to do this really, and like a lot of what's complicated about it is just knowing what to do. So like I try to do a lot of demonstrations of like, oh, let me build this thing in an hour and like also show you me making a lot of mistakes or like forgetting what I'm doing and like showing those errors in the process and still being like, but we can get this done in an hour and like getting to the end of that and getting to something kind of tangible. Um, that's the thing I try to think about a lot when teaching, but I don't know. I think I'll throw it to you, Chris. Like, what is your like for as a student? Like, do you feel like the way I think about it is accurate, or do you feel like there's like a different perspective that you have when like watching me do things in class or something like that?
I mean, it's been a minute now. I think it's been like 3 years since that class, which is crazy.
Yeah,
Time is
probably. Yeah.
wild. Um, and also shout out Soft Not Week because Alex was in that same class
Hmm.
and they released a game last year and it's good. And there's a Kickstarter this year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
for the
yeah, that was
tabletop
a cool
version.
group. Yeah. Um, so I'm gonna link in the description because I backed that. I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, like generally, I think what you just said is accurate. it's a little hard to try to think of like our group too, because there were some people like Alex who are like actively in the industry or have their own studio or multiple jobs, but they're learning new skills versus
Hmm.
other people that were like me. Some of us were like early 20s, not knowing much. Some of us were 30-ish then, not knowing much and trying to figure out like how we're all kind of steadily just learning and figuring stuff
Hmm.
out. But not necessarily directly answering your question, is even though I haven't continued those skills as much as I would have liked, um, the abridged version of a convo we had was I spent time trying to get a job that could have been time spent making a thing,
Hmm.
which I regret a bit now that time has passed. But there's a game I'm playing for review right now, where even though I don't know how to make all of the game, obviously, there's been parts where it's like, oh wait, I totally understand how they would have done this scene or done
Hmm.
this thing. And it's like, oh, I can't make this whole 9 hour game with my current knowledge, but like I could probably make a scene from the game if I just jumped back in.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. And I think the thing with like with making things quickly or like on a time frame, it's really just um I always think of it as just like following the path of like least resistance. So if like oh if I think about like oh I'm gonna make like a little space shooter Galaga thing or something, and I'm like okay I have an hour so I'm gonna make a little ship that can move like you know like this, make something that like the enemies do something in a formation, and you could go like okay how do I get the enemies to fly in a formation? I could make a very complex system that's like tells them how to do it, or I could just say like, oh, I'm just gonna like hand animate the thing, and then like they'll do it, and I know that it looks right. And depending on my mood, literally in the day, like that's what I usually go with. And if it's a dumb solution, but I only have that's the only solution that comes to mind, I just kind of do that. I don't think too heavily about it until it's like later on. It's like, oh, here's an issue that's come up, and then I address the issue. I think a lot of people get that like are slower because they have that kind of choice paralysis of like, oh, I could, you can. There's 1,000 ways to make a game. How do I do this? What should I really do? And I think that's my big approach is just like get something on paper, get something in engine, and then decide if it's good or bad. And then it's really easy to look at it and be like, actually, that's bad. I'm going to change what I did. Um, so yeah. And there's tons of times where like I've had a task I want to do, where it's like maybe I'm doing an animation or I'm doing something that I have to just something I have to make for a game. And I just did my first attempt at it and I just didn't like it and I didn't know why. And it literally was just like I just had to do it on a different day. Like on a different day my whatever brain was just working a little better and
yeah,
there
you'll
there
see it
wasn't like a
differently.
yeah it wasn't like oh here's an epiphany. It was just like oh you know what, for whatever reason second attempt feels a lot better. And maybe it is like part of the process, like doing the first attempt gives me like something in my brain to be like here's what I want to do next time or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. And kind of, I'm not going to talk about my own work that much, but my version of teaching someone a game is teaching
Hmm.
them how to do something in like an inventory system or a point of sale and
Sure.
stuff like that. And sometimes, like, okay, there's technically 3 ways you can set this up. I'm going to show you the easiest, simplest,
Hmm.
fewest things you need to worry about way. And then after you figure that out, be like, okay, but then there's these other 2 ways that are actually more ideal in the long run, kind of thing. Um, and yeah, having learned a little bit from you, I thought you did a good job of that sort of stuff too, both in class and then just trying to like ask you, how do I do a thing?
Yeah, I appreciate that because I always feel like I'm just like rambling whenever I'm in a class. I'm just because I'm not I have the same approach to classes. I just do my best to prepare and then I just kind of like wing it in class and just kind of like feel out whatever because I feel like I do a lot of detours where I'm doing something in class, someone asks a question, and then I'm like, how long do I spend on this detour? And then I feel like I always spend a little too much time on them, but
But I thought some of the detours would be moments when the most people with our little cams in the corner would be like the most in awe of something you were like showing us
It's
how to do.
because
Be like, oh
someone would
wait, this
ask me to
wasn't
do
like the
something
plan,
like
but wow.
tricky where they're like, I'd be doing like, oh, let's set up a little scene, and someone would be like, and what if you wanted to make this thing explode? And I'd be like, oh, okay, wait, but, yeah, we could do that, and then just trying to like in my mind reverse engineer how much time is left and be like, well, I can't do it that way because we only have 15 minutes, but I could do it this way in 5 minutes maybe, and then just trying it out. Um,
So for us to get a little bit back on track, because we're good at getting off track. So 2019,
yeah.
rewinding again, what were some of those like early things you got working on that then built up your skill set more to eventually make your
Yeah.
own game?
So I think yes, like my first kind of proper industry job was at a studio called TikTok Games. No relation to
Different
Matt,
spelling.
yeah, in Burbank. And they did a lot of different mobile games. They worked on games like Panda Pop or like I forget what it's called. Like I think not Disney something, Disney Emoji Blitz or something they worked on as well. I forget. All the mobile game names blend together for me eventually. But I did some work there as a producer and I did some tech art. Um, and I guess yeah, I'm trying to think of like, oh, was this a big learning experience for me? And I don't necessarily like process a lot of jobs as learning experiences. I feel like at the time I'm just like I gotta do this and get paid because rent is on the way. It's like and that's
Sure.
literally all I'm thinking about. Um, but I would say the things I really learned on that were some of the like elements of making games at scale, right? So these are mobile kind of multi-million dollar budget projects. Working with kind of a lot of IPs. We worked on a Funko Pop game, which is actually really complicated in terms of IP sign-offs and everything because you have like it's like you're putting Shrek in your game and it's like but it's not Shrek, it's Funko Pop's version of Shrek, so you have to get sign off from DreamWorks because they're like Shrek wouldn't do that, Shrek wouldn't say that, right? And then you'll cheat tweak whatever is going on in the game to be like okay, Shrek is like this now. And then you have to get approval from Funko because they're like, yeah, that doesn't look like our Funko Pop. That's not our Funko Pop branding or this or something. And so, or like, oh, actually, in Funko, Shrek is slightly different, something like that. It's like,
Yeah.
oh gosh. And you have to do that for like, it was like a little mobile gotcha game. So we had like 100 characters or something that you had to do that for. Um, and that's very complicated. And it's like so many meetings of like, okay, we didn't get approval. We have to schedule another meeting with literally like, massive film company that doesn't care that we're making this game at all. Uh, so that was like I think a big learn of just like the logistics of approaching something of that scale, and also that I never want to really do something that big. It's like, oh, it's way better to just do something really small where we don't have to go and set up a 50 meetings to do like like you're like what if Shrek punched someone and you're like Shrek can punch someone, right? He punches people in the movies and they're like, well, here's the specifics of when Shrek punch is like really
This is
annoying,
the form he needs
you
to
know
have with his
all
punch.
sorts of things. It took a really long time. I remember we were doing an attack for an ability for Tigress from the Kung Fu Panda movies, and that got so many iterations where it was just that the DreamWorks people didn't like it. They were like, we just think it could be better, like more effort put into this, and we're like, man, what do they want?
We're
So it was
putting
like
effort in, you know.
so we just tried so many different things with that and so many different like looks to how the effects and everything and how it would look. So yeah, working on that lesson of like working on small things means you don't have to do that. You can just like maybe get one person needs to sign off or maybe it's just like what you want to do, and that if you want something that's large and has like some decent funding, those are kind of the hoops you end up jumping through a lot of the time. Um, so that was, yeah, my first job. I did that for like a year, and then I switched to doing freelance work because I had moved and the commute was a bit insane. It was like a 3 hour commute at the time, and I couldn't maintain it.
Yeah, that's a
So I
lot.
ended up finding work at an indie, like remote indie studio called Heart Shaped Games, for a project called We Are the Caretakers. It was a project that had a lot to do with kind of nature conservancy, animal welfare, like anti-poaching, those sorts of themes. Um, and I think the significant thing about that was that I got that job in February-ish of 2020. So I switched coincidentally to a remote job, and then a month later, pandemic hit and everyone was working remote, and I was like, oh my gosh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
And I really needed to transition out of my in-person job at the time, so I did a thing where I was like working. I was technically, for the first month of that new job, I had not left the old job yet, so there was overlap. So I was doing two jobs for 1 month in like January, February-ish, which for me at the time I was like, okay, this is a lot to do. But in retrospect, great decision. Great decision to leave exactly when I did and then have a job for like the first 2 years of the pandemic without any issues. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where I was at in 2020-ish.
And so when did you start with Code Coven as well then? Was that like 2022?
It would have been 2020, end of 2021, like right at the end of 2021. So 2020, I remember being very excited because I was like, oh, I'm going to go to GDC. I'm going to be working on a cool project. And then pandemic happened. So GDC got canceled. So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm not going to go to GDC. And then a lot of what was happening during the pandemic was, I guess, kind of like, yeah, stressing me out or making me anxious or something. And so towards the end of 2020 was when I started working on Midautumn for the first time. So it kind of was informed by a lot of those early pandemic experiences as an Asian diaspora person, and just talking to other Asian diaspora devs. And I was like, well, what if we worked on like a project that was kind of like this? It's about like, that feeling of your community, and your community is changing, and there's all of these things, and a lot of those feelings of diaspora. Um, and we did a Kickstarter for it towards the end of 2021, like September, October. And I think literally a few weeks after that is when I started working for Coven. So I'd gotten the job maybe like a few months before, and it started I think in October or November of 2021.
The the GDC mention, like that timing is just kind of funny to me because for whatever reason, well, speaking of kind of funny, so when I think of really early 2020, like right on the cusp of lockdown, I
Mm-hmm.
specifically recall listening to the Kind of Funny podcast, like one of their gaming podcasts, talking about GDC being canceled. Because I think
Mm-hmm.
it was a week later was then things in my town were just closed. It's like, oh yeah, this is all really bad. Like there were rumblings for a couple of months and stuff, but it's like, oh yeah, GDC not being a thing, feels like a big deal. Things are gonna get bad. Yeah, just I hadn't thought about that in a minute. Now I'm immediately
Yeah, I
can
had a
picture my
lot
old
of like
apartment listening to that podcast.
awkward emails where there's like emails of people I was going to chat with or talk to at GDC, and it was just emails of like, I guess we're not doing this. I guess we're not going to be doing any of these things, and we're not going to be going to GDC. So sorry. It was like sorry to like lie to you about this.
That's
Um,
funny.
yeah, it was I think it was literally when like Facebook or Meta, I forget if they were still Facebook, when they pulled out of GDC. I think that was a big thing of like, oh, they're not sending people to GDC because they're worried about, I don't know, getting sued or something. I was like, oh, it's not safe to go to GDC. Uh, like though, anytime it's like a big company that's like willing to not, because like companies put their workers in dangerous situations all the time.
All
So
the
anytime
time.
they're like,
Yeah.
"Oh, we're not going to do that," you're like, "How bad is it?" Like if they're it's got to be like really bad then if they're going to like give up profits.
So yeah, you didn't go to GDC in 2020 because nobody did, but you did start a Mid-Autumn. You had the Kickstarter, and it went into early access in like around this time in 2023.
Yeah. We've been in access since 2023, and then just kind of like a quiet early access. We have like a little chill group of folks that like give us feedback. And we've just been working away at it, hopefully trying to get it done this year. I think that we have like a 1.0 build for it. That's not necessarily going to be public. Like it's like, oh, there's people are like, oh, can I play it yet? And it's like, oh, well, we have the 1.0 build, but we're going to like do a lot of testing. We're going to put chunks of it out and see how it actually performs. And then yeah, just kind of trying to find like a good launch window too, because it's been very chaotic. I was not anticipating the level of chaos in the games industry when I was like, let me make a game.
Yeah, I don't think
I
anyone
was
could have
like, oh,
predicted it this way.
I was like, the pandemic is as chaotic as things will get in my brain. I was like, oh yeah, so only uphill from here when I was and then I was like, oh okay, like tons of layoffs, which means a lot of the contracts I do, or it's like a lot more precarious, which is how I'm like funding a lot of the projects I do. Then we also had honestly, like Elon Musk buying Twitter pissed me off so much because I was like, this is like infrastructure. Like we're using it to like market. It's like okay, so that's not really effective anymore because it's like scaring off all the people who would play specifically the games that I make are like not
Totally.
really
Yeah.
on Twitter. So,
And there's so many
um,
random games and game developers that I was following on Twitter kind of
mhm.
2019 to 23-ish. And every few weeks, I'm still kind of like re-stumbling upon one of them on Instagram or Blue Sky. It's like, oh wait, yeah, like I remember watching you post GIFs and stuff for 3 years, and then just
Yeah,
like totally lost your internet existence
it
until
was
now.
yeah, it was because I was very proactive about it. I was like talking to all of my community manager friends. I was like, so Twitter is not really doing well for a lot of folks right now. Is there a like different social media that we're all going to? And it like didn't really materialize for a very long time. I feel like I think like right now, I'm mostly on Blue Sky, and I think that a good enough chunk of game developers are on Blue Sky that it made sense to go there. And like, but it's definitely not the same as Twitter, where there was just a bunch of non-game devs who were interacting with game devs and would like literally buy like I would post things and get sales, and it was like okay, that's great, and it's tough to not have that. It's like you still figure it out. Any work environment, you figure out how to make it work. But um, the reason why we don't have it is stupid to me. It's just like, oh, the most divorced man in the world bought
Yeah,
like the thing I use to make a living. Great.
yeah, just one
Uh,
of the worst, wealthiest people in human existence ruined the thing. Yeah,
so yeah, I think that's kind of where we've been with early access. Because yeah, I think the way it works, I don't know how much folks who are like following along with mid-autumn stuff would be aware, but I'm always like, okay, I got to figure out contract work, do that, pay rent, pay anyone who's been working on mid-autumn for stuff. And then after that, I'm like, okay, now in my nights and evenings, let me make progress on mid-autumn. So it's a lot of the time I'm working on mid-autumn and I'm like the most exhausted I could be as I'm working on it.
because you have to
Um,
do all those other things before you can be doing that.
yeah, just because it's like, um, there's different ways we could have done it, but I think I always wanted to make sure, um, and because I was kind of seeing that the industry is going to be very chaotic, I wanted to make sure we didn't get into a situation where people were just waiting on like payments for things, or like we didn't know if and like bringing people on to do a ton of work without knowing if we could figure that out. So it's like we had our the funds we got from a Kickstarter, a lot of the time you try to see if like you can leverage that into more like larger publishing deals. I think with Mid-Autumn it became very clear it's like okay, like there's and it's I think a lot of the time just because when you make things about like serious topics or like those sorts of like issue driven games, um, it's not that there's no funding for them. It's that one of the things we did with Mid Autumn was we also made it kind of like an actiony like roguelike game, and like those sorts of games I think it's you get a lot of narrative driven visual novelty kind of experiences tend to be allowed to be about certain topics, and then games that are more in certain genres, I think it's just tougher to like pitch to people. So, I don't know. I don't know how good of a pitch person I am. I like to think I did a good pitch of everything, but we definitely got some additional funds post Kickstarter. Like we got some grants and we got some smaller things like that. But we were very much like, okay, let's try and figure out a scope of this that we can do without everyone being stressed and not having money and being able to find work.
Yeah, let's just continue diving deeper into Mid Autumn earlier, and I know
Sure.
you've made this kind of comparison of mashing these two games together before, of Butterfly Soup and Hades. How does that come together? What does that look like for people who aren't familiar with Mid Autumn? What
Yeah. So
what
okay. So
visually and kind of gameplay is that like?
there's like and a good thing to understand is like I have my own ways that I relate to Mid Autumn as like as a developer, but I think different members of our team will have different answers for this. But I was very interested, I think, for a long time in making something that was like a narrative driven roguelike. I think roguelikes as a structure have a really interesting, like that cyclical structure is really cool for certain types of stories. And I think particularly a story about kind of incremental change or incremental resistance, your community changing over time, I think fits really well with a roguelike. I always had like a theory about making something like that. And I think specifically when Hades came out, it was a oh, let's make this now because Hades has come out and narrative driven roguelikes are really popular now. So it's a good time to be making this. And I feel like a lot of our influences for Mid Autumn, like we picked good influences because a lot of them got sequels. Like Hades, famously, like Supergiant doesn't do sequels, and they did a sequel
Yeah,
for
and they did.
Hades.
Yeah,
And
I
what
think Butterfly
else?
Soup has a second game, right?
Butterfly Soup is. I feel like I'm trying to think of other ones, but like I remember being like, huh, a lot of the ones that like I looked at got sequels, which I feel like to me that's like good reading market analysis of like, yeah, they all did well enough that they got sequels, and I was like, these are cool games to be influenced by. Um, so I really wanted to, yeah, like tell a story that was kind of driven by the mechanics of a roguelike. And I think Hades is a very similar take on it, right? Where it's like, oh, they've created a setting where you are trapped in this kind of Sisyphean uh, turmoil that you're trying to like escape the underworld, but you're always doomed to kind of like die and come back. And we have a similar thing, but I think the we wanted to showcase a lot more change like over time. So it's less driven by that like eternal um, and Hades does change as well, to be fair. Like it changes a lot as you play it. But we wanted to do something that felt more like time was progressing. Like so, that was one of the challenges with what we were trying to do. Is how to convey that in a cyclical structure. And a lot of that is just like yeah, like paying attention to things the player does and like changing some of the narrative when you do things at certain times and changing some of the environment. Um, and yeah, I think those are the main things. I feel like we had a lot of conversations about what was kind of happening during the early pandemic. A lot of kind of historical elements too of like ethnic enclaves, like Chinatowns, and like how a lot of those communities historically have like functioned. Um, And so there's a lot of stuff in Mid-Autumn about specifically like the California Gold Rush, and we have like a very fictionalized town that was founded kind of during the Gold Rush era. Um, there are a lot of like kind of real world analogs. There's a town in California called Lockport, which was like this town that was founded by Asian Americans. They kind of bought it from the original owners, and then today that town is kind of like very quiet and like not very thriving, I want to say. No offense to the any residents of Lockport. I just from researching it, that's the impression I got. But we wanted to do a take on what if there was like a community like that that was thriving today. What would that look like? What would it be like? And what would the challenges they were facing be in the context of this kind of fantastical setting we've created as well for it?
Yeah, and you have extremely vibrant color palette throughout the game. I love
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
very detailed character portraits offset by the like purposely more kind of like simplified pixel art
Hmm.
of the characters within the world. All works like really well together. And in terms of combat, yes, it is like action roguelike, like a Hades, but the thing that I'm still trying to work at getting better at too is it's a combat system where you are reliant on your enemies doing certain attacks to then power your attacks to then like take down shields, and you can get rot and hurt yourself, and sometimes I end up just
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
killing myself against the second
Yes.
boss in particular. So I'm still working on it. It's a
And
very interesting system.
it is, and I think and this is one of the things of like making smaller budget things is that you can do weird stuff. And if it was like if we had spent like 10 times the budget on this, I wouldn't be able to do that because I'd be like, okay, this is just too weird. Let's just do something that people are used to. Because the big challenge is like, oh, it's not an existing combat system. We need to know how to tutorialize it correctly. But the reason we did that was kind of just designing it from first principles, which means like kind of just not having any exceptions about how the combat should work, doing testing, and one of the things we were looking for is looking at like people that were playing Hades. I think there was a group of people that love Hades for the characters, the narrative, the story, but are intimidated playing roguelikes or like big actiony games. And so we felt like, oh, there's probably like a niche there of like maybe we make a version of Hades that caters more to like people that like visual novels or those sorts of things than Hades does. And so a lot of our early playtests were with people that didn't play action games. They were like, oh, I mostly do narrative games or visual novels or like those sorts of things. And when we were testing it, a lot of the things we noticed were they tend to panic a lot in combat situations. So they would, and they get used to it eventually. But like during first kind of gameplay, they're like, combat would happen, they would go, ah, and they would just kind of like press something, and they would also get hit a lot. They weren't like necessarily like dodging, like, really good at dodging attacks. So in designing our combat system, the problem we were trying to solve was what if we could make it not so scary to get hit and also to not be that bad if you panic a little bit in the combat. So that's why we can't kind of get this like hot potato system where it's like, yeah, like we say like, oh, your enemy attacks power your attacks. So it's you get hit by an enemy attack, usually the ranged attacks. We have melee attacks that work normally, but they typically aren't that impactful. Like they're still there for like the feeling of it, but they're not usually what kills you in a run. Um, but we have, yeah, you take like a damage from a ranged attack and it doesn't do any damage. But if you wait for like a second or so, you will take some damage from it when you next attack, right? So the idea was like, oh, you are taking damage from them just on a delay. So if you get hit, you actually have time to respond to it a bit more than you would in a typical action game. So the goal was to really just and like a lot of our damage VFX don't look like damage. Like you get hit with the attack and it looks like a little cool like power up effect instead. So the goal was to like get people comfortable more quickly with the idea of getting hit with attacks and like not have it be this whole issue. And the thing that's really scary in our game is like if you don't get rid of the energy that's like you're getting from those attacks, right? So it's just teaching you like, oh, you got hit, well then press the attack button right away, right? Like uh don't wait around.
You
Because
got
a lot
hit,
of
hit
roguelikes, they
back.
can have very like sometimes like very conservative gameplay where you're like waiting and you're finding the right moment. So we just wanted to make like very aggressive gameplay where people are just like trying to be up front and in up in your enemy's personal space. And I thought it'd be very cool to find a way to teach visual novel players to play roguelikes very aggressively. Because I like a lot of like combat, Devil May Cry, Souls games, like those things I really enjoy, and I also really like visual novels. And so to me, is like, is there a way to make this fun for people who don't typically play these genres? Um, and what's been fun is I think it's very successful in that sense. I think a lot of people who don't play action games have a really good time like learning how to play Mid Autumn, and like they don't necessarily get stressed in the same way. But a big challenge we've had is actually making it still work for people who love roguelikes a lot because they end up playing really differently. Like they end up bringing a lot of their preconceptions of how a roguelike should work into Mid Autumn, and then they make like really interesting misconceptions about how to play the game well. So that was like, yeah, literally like 20% of our development was like, hey, we made a really cool combat system for people that don't play uh, a lot of dungeon crawlers and roguelikes. And then 70% was like, and now we have to make it work for everybody else. And so that took like most of our time.
That's interesting. So, especially with it being in early access, now it's been in early access for multiple years and everything, how has the development changed over time? Whether
Mm-hmm.
it's been just from how many helping hands you do or don't have during a given period, or having to figure out that 70%. Like, how has that just
Yeah, I
altered over
mean
the
that a
years?
lot of that 70% was like early access stuff because one of the reasons, I think a lot of games they'll do early access less as early access and more as like a soft launch. So
Sure.
they will do it with like a fully finished game just with like less content. And so the expectations for early access are very warped now. But I really wanted to do early access with Mid Autumn just because I think it's a very complicated genre of game, and you really need player feedback to be able to understand how all of these systems work. Especially for me, as like someone who hasn't really made this genre to that extent. So I wanted to get it in front of people and just really understand like there's only so much playtesting you can do. So just getting it in front of the average player um, is just I think very necessary. So and there were a lot of things where like I thought, oh, these will be the things people complain about, or these will be the issues people have. And we launched, and it was like there was a bunch of things that came completely out of left field. I was like, oh, people care about this, and it was like, oh, um, the I wasn't like we had a lot of bug fixes that had to do with our controller support, and like when we were testing, I was like, oh, our controller support's fine. Everyone's happy with the way it's working, and there's this, and then when we launched, there was like a lot more questions about that than I remember being like, oh, we are going to need to immediately after launch put in like a new game plus mode or something like that because people are going to like run out of things and that's what they're going to complain about is there's nothing left to do. And then I was like, oh, that's not what people are complaining about at all. Like I was like, okay, that's good that I don't have to do that right away. And then gave us more time. um, but yeah, I think what changed was having a better understanding of I think we've always been very honed in on our core audience and like what the people who are naturally excited about Mid Autumn as a game care about. Um, but early access was very useful for understanding the people outside of that core audience, what they care about, and what the opportunities are. Like, oh, if we can figure out a way to like stretch the game this way, like a slightly larger chunk of people will enjoy it. And then maybe there are places where it's just not feasible. It's like, oh, it would change the game too much or what we want to do. So we just have to like deal with that pain point for certain types of players.
So I am a bad early access player
Hmm.
of games in general. I don't play games in early access that much. Even if I've been really anticipating them, I didn't play either Hades game in early access. I'm not playing Slay the Spire 2 in early access yet, even though it's tempting, because I know I would just sink a ridiculous amount of time into that. On the development side, what has the player feedback been like in early access over time? Like, have there
Hmm.
just been, here's a bunch of people playing the first week or month, and then there's just kind of different waves? Like, what's that like on your end when you're also wanting more people to have
Yeah.
feedback and
And it's a big catch 22 because I understand as a player why someone would be like, let me wait till it's done in early access. Like there are so many people that are like, and I know that that's a big chunk of people where they're like wishlisted Mid Autumn. They've even bought Mid like there's a bunch of people that have bought Mid Autumn and then they're like, and they haven't like loaded it up once. So I'm like, they're waiting for it to be done. So it's very funny to me. It is a thing that I tell people like, hey, if you're interested in playing this at all, it's useful for me because I want to make the game like as good as possible. And if there are players that are willing to like, yeah, potentially like spoil some of their enjoyment, I really appreciate that. But I think the way that it's changed is I'm always during development keeping an eye on the types of problems that we're solving because game development is just you're solving problems all the time. You're fixing bugs all the time, and it just feels like an endless. Oh, there's so many things. But there were times like when we were really early development where it was like, oh, players didn't know how to move or they didn't know how to like attack. Like there were players that would like miss how to do those things, and so it's like I always treat it in phases of like, oh, okay, we're on these problems, and then 6 months later we're getting these complaints, and they're still like complaints we have to deal with, but like sometimes I'm like, well, that's progress. It's progress to be at a certain point. So a lot of the time, um, I also look at it in terms of like, hey, well, let's make a game that's fun to play for 5 minutes and then people get bored and then they stop and then like let's make a game that's fun for people to play for 15 minutes and then you literally like you could see it when we were doing the mid-autumn demos. It's like they play 15 minutes and they would get to a point they'd be like, okay, yeah, that's a good point to stop. And then we're like, okay, we have to make something that's good for like an hour and let's make something that's good for like 6 hours, right? And then put points where people want to take a break. And then so that's those are like the milestones in my head of like, oh, we have something that like people will play for like an extended period of time. And I think right now I still feel like Mid Autumn people will play it. I'm confident people will play it for like a couple hours and then stop. And then it's the question of like what gets people back in to like do like a second session and things like that. And I think a lot of the time it's like our narrative. So it's just baking in things in our narrative that make people go, "Oh, well, I want to find out what happens with that, so I will come back to it and like do another attempt or something like that."
yeah,
Um,
as a player that's kind of where I am currently myself. I've only played 2.5 hours,
yeah,
but two of those are from the last couple of weeks, and that half hour was from like day one or day two.
gotcha,
And then I
gotcha.
was like, I'll just wait because I'm one of those people that will mostly wait. But Robin's just a really cool character, like a
Hmm.
kind of effectively a gender protagonist. Like just
Yeah, 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 yeah. I don't know that we. What were we thinking of specifically? Like, I think a lot of people have specifically been like, Robin is non-binary. And I think we didn't like go like let's write a non-binary character. I think we did like a non-gendered character. And our lead narrative designer and writer Cece is non-binary. So I do think that's kind of what happened. It's just like we made Robin kind of non-binary for people. And we were talking about like we will use they them pronouns to refer to Robin in development. We'll use a gender neutral name. And it's very interesting. Like people do gender Robin all the time. Like there are people who like to them Robin is a boy or Robin is a girl, and they it's very interesting because they're like very locked in. Um, and yeah, I probably think of Robin just as like a non-binary character these days. But yeah, I think and it's I don't know why we like I'm trying to think of like why we did. I think we just wanted to do that because we thought it would be more interesting narratively to not like shoehorn in a particular gendered lens for like what Robin's going through in the story. Um, and it's not like necessarily a huge part of Robin's perspective of the world, but I feel like just in writing it, there is just a lot of like just non-binary undertones to it that we weren't necessarily like, oh, let's put all this in. It's just like in writing the character, I think that happened.
I mean,
Um,
a couple hours in, like I think it's worked well. Like as a non-binary trans person, I appreciate having that representation, but also it's not like this is the character's whole deal, or it's like a
yeah,
really
I feel like
clear, obvious part about them. It's like very undertoned, low
we
key.
wanted people to connect with Robin, but we wanted to make Robin like non-gendered because we wanted Robin to be not a full blank slate character, but like 10% of a blank slate character. And Robin obviously has like a backstory and has particular character traits that are not the players. Like Robin is kind of has like is like a little nosy is like one of their like big things. They kind of sometimes make some questionable decisions too, right? Like that I don't think the player would necessarily make. Um, and that's and part like Robin has a whole arc, right? Like a big part of Robin's arc, I think, is like accepting the responsibility that they have as this guardian of the spirit world. And there's a lot of like I feel like old cartoons that have that. Like there are a lot of like old like Asian diaspora cartoons that had very similar premises where like American Dragon, Jake Long, or like Juniper Lee, or like I think there's like other like live action shows too. So we were kind of I think looking at some of those as like the tone at the very least of like but I think we have our own like themes and the things we wanted to like talk about with the story.
Awesome. Yeah, I need to. I've finally played with a controller for the first time earlier
Mm-hmm.
today. Most of my time so far has been with mouse and key, but it's also the first time I've really played an action game without a controller, and I was trying to just will it to happen. But I think now that I'm actually using the controller settings that you worked so hard to get
I did like literally
integrated.
one of the first things I did after early access because we got all these issues. I was like, we have to redo the whole controller thing because these issues are like I don't know why they're happening. So we just need like and I literally went to a GameStop and just bought like I was like, what controllers do you have? Like, because everyone's like saying, oh, I have this issue, but like I'm not getting this issue on my controllers I'm using to test. So I was just like, give me all the like shitty controllers that you have and let me like test them all out and see if I can get figure out what the problems are.
I'm glad that that happened so that I can use a third party controller and learn to get good at the game so I can get past second boss and experience more story. I think we're going to be winding down here soon, but
Mm-hmm.
do you have any particular favorite characters or bosses, like any particular encounters in the game where you're like, I'm really proud of this encounter, or I think this character came out really amazing? Anybody you
Yeah,
want to shout out within the game?
I mean, I think I'm always very, very excited about a lot of our characters. I think like a lot of our, because it's just a big team effort to get them done, right? So we have like, our voice acting, we have our writing, we have our like character portraits, and they all kind of come together and I think create a lot of the vibe. I think some of my favorite characters from Midautumn specifically, I really like the Terracotta Warrior characters. We call Lee a lot when we're talking about him, but he technically has. like a couple different names in you can give them in the story. Um, I think Choi is also one of my favorite characters from Mid-Autumn. He's just very like just a very flamboyant guy, you know, and just very like who else? I think some of our I really enjoy a lot of our bosses because I spend a lot of time kind of working on them. And that's one of the things I've been working on for like our next update whenever that's ready is just like boss reworks and just giving them more personality, more things going on. And so maybe I'll make I don't know, we'll have to see if I make the second boss harder or easier with that change. That's a lot of like, oh, you put it out or like, did I make it easier or harder? Let's tweak it. But we're that's Mirai has needed like a lot of love, I think, in terms of the boss fight, and I've been always waiting to be like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, and I'd love to go back and just like work on that a little bit more. So getting to work on that has been very fun. And I have really been enjoying some of our later boss fights. Like, there is a character later on named Ravana, who's like a very fun character to work on. And then our final boss, obviously, like your final boss has to be like the most exciting, so you do like a lot of extra work on it. And I personally enjoy a lot, like working on boss fights. I think they're very fun examples of game design and everything. So I spend a lot of time thinking about them and like, oh, what could I do? So that's yeah, I'm like fully deep in that like boss polish for the next couple months. So that's where I think a lot of my interests are with the characters right now.
Well, I'm looking forward to gradually beating more of them so I can see all of them and then appreciate that polish once I get
Yeah, and
there.
I mean like that's also why we put in like a lot of the accessibility features because like I think for some folks they just want to see what happens, so it's like good for them to be able to like tweak the difficulty on their end as well.
Sure. Which maybe I will do eventually, but right now I want to just let things be as they are and get better at it. Because I'm kind of one of the people you were talking about earlier of like, I've played a lot of games that on paper are like this, but where combat functions very differently. So it has been a bit
Hmm.
of a just learning curve of trying to make decisions differently. But been really enjoying it these last few weeks in particular. So I need to keep that up, and maybe I will hit you up and be like, "Hey,
Yeah,
this thing's
if
pretty
you have
cool.
questions,
Here's
yeah,
this
let me
bug."
know. And yeah, if you have feedback, please let me know.
Yeah, everybody should give feedback. Play the game, wishlist the game, but also just buy the game. Is there anything else in particular you want to talk about before we go, or anybody on the team you want to plug?
I think, I feel like no, because all of the things I would say about like team members are like just things they're up to in their personal lives, which I feel like I don't know if I want to just. But um, other things I'm working on, I'm doing a lot of the organizing for the Game Workers Conference that's happening in May, so that's
Cool.
something that I hope folks check out and come attend. It's like a remote conference that we're doing in coordination with a bunch of the game unions, including United Video Game Workers. So yeah, that's I think a good thing to plug. Definitely
Yeah, that
come
sounds
check that
great.
out. You know,
Okay, awesome. So yeah, everyone should check that out. Everyone should check out the game. And also please like, subscribe, all those things here so that I can keep talking to more people like Sherveen and we can talk about more games. But on that note, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. Make good choices. Have a good day.
thanks
Bye
everyone.
bye. So that is that. Thanks for chatting.